Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring this really cool technology called nip impression film.
Yeah.
Now, you might be asking, like, what is that? And why should I even care?
Yeah.
Whether you work with, like, machinery,
Mm-hmm.
or you really care about the quality of the products you're making, or you just love to, learn about how stuff works, this is going to be really fascinating for you. We're going to be looking at this company, Sensor Products, Inc.
Mm-hmm.
They make this really cool technology, and they're the experts. So today we're going to kind of uncover some of the secrets behind it.
Absolutely. What's really cool about nip impression film is that it's so simple. So you just take this thin film,
Right.
and it's almost like you wouldn't think much of it, but it can reveal so much about, the forces that are working in your machinery,
That-
especially the forces between rollers.
That's so interesting. It's like we're about to like pull back the curtain and see
Yeah.
this hidden world within our machines. But for those of us who don't know, what exactly are nip impressions and how do they actually help us?
Okay, so imagine you've got a printing press or a manufacturing line. And of course, you've got rollers in those. And those rollers are pressing together. That contact point between those rollers is called the nip.
Oh,
So the nip impression film captures the actual contact width between those two rollers.
got it.
And this is really key because it tells us whether the pressure is evenly distributed across those rollers or if there are any inconsistencies.
So it's really telling us how those rollers are actually interacting with each other and the pressure points along that.
Right.
Okay, so let's say the pressure isn't even. What kind of problems does that lead to? What can happen?
Oh man, uneven pressure can just cause so many issues like with your product quality. For example, you might see variations in thickness or color.
Interesting.
You might see wasted materials because the rollers aren't applying consistent pressure. They might use more than they need.
Oh, yeah. It's like they're squeezing too hard in some places
Right.
or not hard enough in others, and it's affecting the overall consistency.
And then you also have increased wear and tear on the machinery itself.
Oh, I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Makes total sense. It's putting undue stress in certain spots.
Exactly. Uneven pressure puts more stress on certain parts of the rollers, and then that leads to premature wear, cracks, and then, ultimately costly repairs
Yeah,
and downtime.
the things that everybody wants to avoid.
Yeah.
So it's not just thinking about the product right now, but really the long-term health
Mm-hmm.
of your machinery. So this nip impression film is like an early warning system.
Exactly.
It's telling us, hey, pay attention over here.
It's like a detective,
Yeah.
revealing these hidden issues before they turn into major expenses.
I love that analogy. Okay. I'm starting to get a sense of, why this is so valuable. But what I'm wondering is, wouldn't it be enough to just monitor the pressure being applied? Like if we know how much force is going into the rollers, why do we need to know the actual nip width?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually a really important point because nip width is a much more accurate measurement than pressure alone.
Okay, now you've got me really interested.
Yeah.
So can you break that down for us? What is the difference between those two?
Okay, so think about it this way. If you push down on a sponge with the same force as you push down on a rock, they're going to react really differently.
Of course, yeah. The sponge will compress and the rock's not going to move.
Right. The sponge compresses, but the rock just stays put. And roller materials, they kind of behave similarly.
Oh, that's so interesting. So you're saying different roller materials, even if they're under the same pressure, they'll actually deform differently.
Exactly. So nip width takes both the pressure and the material's deformation into account. And that gives you a much more complete picture of what's actually happening at that contact point. Pressure alone doesn't tell the whole story.
Nip width is looking at the whole picture.
Yes.
Like the whole footprint of the force and the material's response to it. That makes so much sense.
And that's why it's so valuable.
Okay, I think I'm on board. This is really interesting. But how does it work? How do you actually use it? Is it complicated?
Not at all. So Sensor Products, Inc., they've designed this film to be really user-friendly.
Okay, good.
It's really quite simple. You just clean the rollers, apply the film to the bottom roller where the nip will occur, bring the rollers together with pressure, then remove the film,
Yeah.
and then you just have a clear impression of that contact area.
It's like taking a snapshot
Yep.
of that interaction between those rollers.
Exactly.
Love that.
At that exact moment.
So what can you actually learn? What can we see in that snapshot?
You can see a lot. So first, you get a visual representation of the nip width. You can see right away if the pressure is even across the whole width or not.
So anything that looks like inconsistent is basically a red flag.
Yeah.
Like, hey, there might be a problem here.
Exactly. Exactly. It could indicate that maybe there's worn bearings, maybe the rollers are misaligned, or maybe there's an issue with the roller crown.
Crown, that's a term I'm not familiar with.
Okay, so the crown of the roller, that refers to its slightly convex shape. So they design it that way to kind of compensate for the deflection that naturally happens when the rollers are under pressure. And that makes sure that there's even contact across the whole width.
So the roller's not perfectly cylindrical. It has this subtle barrel shape almost
Exactly.
to help distribute that pressure.
And that's vital for preventing wear and tear and making sure things are performing consistently.
It's amazing how something that subtle can make such a big difference.
Right.
Okay, so going back to the nip impression itself, what else can we learn from that? What else can we see besides just the distribution of pressure?
Well, one of the things that's really cool about this film is that it creates a permanent record of those nip impressions. So you can keep them and you can track changes over time. You can see, as the rollers wear or if you adjust the pressure, how that nip width changes. It's like having a history of your roller's performance.
I was going to say, you can almost see the evolution of the roller.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
And that helps you make more informed decisions about maintenance and adjustments.
And even what kind of roller materials to use in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's incredible. Okay, this all makes perfect sense to me now. But you mentioned earlier that the film can also be used to help determine the crown of the roller. I'm curious, how does that work?
Oh, it's really neat. So basically you compare the nip width at the center of the roller to the nip width at the edges.
Yeah.
And then using that information, you can calculate the amount of crown.
So you're saying just by analyzing how wide that impression is in different spots, you can tell how curved the roller is.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that information is really crucial because, you want to make sure that that roller is going to be performing optimally.
Of course. So now we've got all this information. We've taken these measurements. What do we do with it? How do we actually make adjustments based on what we see?
Well, Sensor Products Inc. has a formula that you can use. So you just plug in your nip width measurements, and then you can calculate the optimal crown for your particular rollers in your operating conditions.
So it's not just about seeing it. It's about being able to apply the information and actually change things based on it.
Right. So the film gathers the information, but then it's the analysis of it and the application of it that really unlocks those benefits. There's a whole science behind it.
Yeah.
Understanding the forces, understanding the properties of the materials, and how to optimize everything for the best performance and save money.
I'm completely blown away. I never realized there was so much to rollers. But before we get too deep into the technical side of things, I want to make sure this is all connecting with our listeners. So for somebody out there who's working with rollers every day, what does all this mean for them?
Nip impression film can make such a big difference for them. It's a simple tool, but it can really save you money. It can improve your product quality. It can extend the life of your equipment.
Yeah.
It's like if you're in those fields, printing, packaging, converting, anything with rollers, it's like having a secret weapon.
Yeah.
To really optimize your processes and get a leg up in your field.
I'm so glad we've unpacked all of this today. I think what's really clear is that nip impression film is so much more than just a simple film. It's really a gateway to understanding these machines and how they're working, and a tool to actually make things better.
Absolutely.
But I have a feeling there's even more to it. What else can we uncover about this technology?
It's really interesting to see how, a simple tool like this can have such a big impact on different industries.
Yeah.
Like one of the areas where it's made a huge difference is in the printing industry.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Printing presses, they need like the perfect amount of pressure on those rollers to transfer that ink so precisely.
Exactly. And the thing is, those rollers wear down over time, they get misaligned, and then you have all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
Inconsistent print quality, wasted ink, even damage to the press itself.
Oh, that's a nightmare. Especially if it means unhappy customers or production delays.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody wants that. And that's where the nip impression film comes in. By using it regularly, they can keep an eye on their rollers and spot those problems early on.
So it's really about being proactive.
Exactly. It's like giving your printing press a regular checkup.
I love that. Just keeping things running smoothly. Are there other industries where this technology is really valuable?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Another big one is the converting industry.
Converting? What's that?
Think about it this way. Converting is taking these big rolls of raw materials like paper, film, or foil and turning them into finished products like packaging, labels, tapes, all kinds of things.
Oh, so it's like taking that raw material and making it into something we can actually use. And I imagine roller pressure is super important in that process.
Absolutely. Just like in printing, consistent roller pressure is key to getting the quality and consistency right.
And I'm guessing there are a ton of different rollers involved in all these converting processes.
Oh yeah, you've got heating rollers, cooling rollers, laminating rollers, embossing rollers, all kinds. And each one comes with its own challenges, when it comes to maintaining that optimal pressure and keeping everything working right.
So how does the nip impression film help in all of this?
Well, for one thing, it can verify that the rollers are actually making good contact with the material. This is really important in laminating and coating, for example,
Yeah.
where even a tiny gap can cause, defects.
So making sure that adhesive or that coating is applied perfectly.
Exactly. And by checking those nip impressions over time, converters can start to see patterns that might indicate that something needs to be adjusted.
Like if a particular roller is starting to wear out unevenly or if the pressure is changing.
Exactly. And by staying ahead of it, they can prevent problems down the line, like wrinkles or tears or things separating that shouldn't be separating.
It's amazing how something so simple can make such a difference in so many industries. It seems like this film is not just for maintenance, but it's actually a really powerful tool to make things better.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious, are there even more advanced ways to use nip impression film, like beyond just monitoring and troubleshooting?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the coolest areas is research and development.
Really? I never would have thought of that.
Yeah. So researchers are using this film to study, like, the fundamentals of how rollers and materials interact. By analyzing those impressions created by different materials, different pressures, and speeds, they can really understand how all those factors affect performance, how things wear down, and even the final properties of the materials.
So it's like using the film as a scientific instrument to really zoom in and see what's happening at a microscopic level.
Exactly. And then they can take that knowledge and use it to design better rollers and optimize processes, maybe even come up with entirely new materials.
It's amazing how a tool that started out for one purpose can then be used to create something entirely new. But what about the people listening who are thinking, okay, this is all cool, but how do I actually start using this in my own work? What would you tell them?
Well, the good news is it's pretty straightforward to get started with. First, think about your process. Are there any areas where you think you might have roller issues? Maybe you're seeing quality problems, or your equipment is wearing out too quickly, or maybe you just have a hunch that something's not quite right.
So being really observant and paying attention to those little details.
Exactly. Once you've identified those areas, the next step is to pick the right type of film for your needs.
Oh, so there are different kinds.
Absolutely. Sensor Products Inc. has a whole bunch of different films, and they all have different pressure sensitivities, resolutions, and even colors. The right one for you will depend on your specific pressures, materials, and the level of detail you need to see.
So it's not one size fits all. It's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And if you're not sure, Sensor Products Inc. has a team of experts who can help you figure it out.
That's great. It's awesome that they have that support to help people get started. So once you've got the right film, then what?
Well, then it's all about prep. You want to make sure those roller surfaces are really clean, get rid of any dirt or oil that could mess up the impression.
It's like getting a clean canvas ready for your masterpiece.
Exactly. Then you carefully apply the film to the bottom roller, make sure it's lined up right, and then bring those rollers together under normal pressure.
So far, so good. What happens next? You've captured the impression, now what?
Well, then you carefully peel off the film and take a good look at it. Are there any signs of uneven pressure, misalignment, or anything else unusual?
It's like you're a detective looking for clues.
Exactly. And the great thing about nip impression film is that it gives you this visual representation of what's going on.
Yeah.
You can actually see if the pressure is too high in one spot or too low in another.
So you're not just guessing, you can actually see the problem.
Exactly. And with that information, you can start to fix it. Maybe you need to adjust the pressure or realign the rollers or even replace a part that's worn out.
So this is going even beyond maintenance. We're talking about using this to make things better, to improve the process.
Absolutely. By really understanding how that pressure is working in your process, you can find ways to be more efficient, waste less material, and just get better results overall.
This is incredible. It's amazing how something so simple can teach us so much about these complicated processes. We've covered so much today, from the basics of this nip impression film to how it's used in different industries, even in research. But before we go, I want to make sure people listening actually know what to do with this information. They get the benefits, but what's the next step?
That's a great point. If you're working with rollers, like in printing, packaging, converting, anything like that, this nip impression film should be something you're thinking about.
Right.
It's not just for specialists. Anybody who really wants to understand how those rollers are interacting can use this.
It's like you said, really getting a feel for the heartbeat of your machines.
Exactly. You can see things that you'd never know were there otherwise, and that lets you make better decisions about maintenance, about how to adjust things, and even what materials to use for your rollers.
Speaking of materials, you mentioned earlier that Sensor Products Inc. makes all these different types of film. How would somebody know which one is right for them?
Well, Sensor Products Inc. has a great website. It's got tons of resources. They have all the details on the different types of film, what pressures they're good for, how to use them, everything.
It sounds like a one-stop shop for everything nip impression.
Exactly. Plus, they have a whole team of experts who really know their stuff, and they're happy to help. So if you're not sure which film to choose, just reach out to them.
It's really great to hear that they're so focused on supporting people. It really shows that they want people to understand and use this technology well.
Absolutely. They really believe that this film can change how we think about these roller systems, and they want to share that knowledge and help people get the most out of it.
It's inspiring to see a company so passionate about educating their customers, not just selling a product.
I totally agree. That's what makes them such a leader in this field.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the world of nip impression film. You've explained it so well and shown us just how powerful this technology is.
Thanks. It's been fun talking about this. I hope it's made people curious to learn more and try some of these things out.
I'm sure it has. And for anybody who wants to go deeper or experiment with the film themselves, we'll be sure to include links to Sensor Products Inc. in the show notes.
Awesome. Like you always say, knowledge is power when you can actually use it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks so much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thank you for diving in with us. We hope you learned something new today and that you're feeling inspired to explore the hidden forces that shape our world. Until next time, keep those minds working and never stop exploring.